All right, Jimmy Ott along with Paul Stone each and every week doing the college up best bets. Paul back from the state fair, fried Oreos and all kinds of good stuff. And Paul, I got to tell you, I've seen a lot of games, and sometimes I'm a little reluctant to give UT a little praise, but I thought that was the game of the year. I thought both teams were really, really good. Both teams had a lot of defense physicality. It wasn't just as tempo. I thought both teams were very organized, with the coach. And I can nitpick on some of the end clock management, leaving Oklahoma too much time. But how about it, man? Was it as good as it seemed on TV?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've been as a sports writer or as a fan, which I was on Saturday. My wife and I just fans in the stands. I've probably been to close to 25 of these games. First one way back as a little lad, Earl Campbell, senior season of 1977. So I've been to a lot of them, and it just never seems to disappoint. There were some years in there over the last 20 years when Oklahoma's had the upper hand and had some blowouts, and of course the blowout by Texas last year. But this was one to rank among the best that I've been to and the best in recent years. Both teams, as you said, played at a high level. It ultimately you could talk about this game and the final outcome and bring up so many different plays and so many different components of it. But it comes down to Texas turned the ball over 3 times. Oklahoma played a very clean football game, had 0 turnovers. So they were +3 in the turnover category. Texas committed more penalties for more yards than they had all season, failed to get it in from 1 yard out in 4 plays in the fourth quarter, so forth and so on. But Oklahoma was the better team, but Texas certainly showed that it's, deserves probably to be among the nation's elite as well. And these teams will probably meet again in early December in
Yeah.
Arlington for the Big 12 championship.
I can't see how they will, how they won't. But yeah, and note to the SEC schedule makers and Commissioner Greg Sankey leg. But I mean, after Auburn, Alabama, I mean, I'm an SEC guy. This is the best rivalry. I mean, this game has to play every year. I mean, it's a great spectacle. It's good for college football. So we will see, because certainly Nick Saban, he's got Greg Sankey's ear. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's get to the picks this week, Paul. We go down to Tampa, Florida. Battle of two Florida teams. Florida Atlantic going into South Florida to play them. The Bulls are -2 points here.
Yeah, you got 2 first-year coaches here, Alex Golish there at South Florida, and of course Tom Herman at Florida Atlantic. And I really like the job that both have done, but certainly that Alex Golish, who was most previously Josh Heupel's offensive coordinator at Tennessee, the job that he's done there in Tampa to this point, he inherited a program, first of all, that dating back to late 2019, they were 4-33 in their previous 37 games. Of course, these days, in the age of the transfer portal, you can turn around a program very quickly. Golish has certainly done that in Tampa with approximately 50 new players on the roster. But the flip side of that also is the attrition. South Florida lost their best offensive players to other teams, to Power 5 teams in the offseason. 2 of the most notables being last year's top 2 receivers, Xavier Weaver and Jimmy Horn Jr. South Florida's top 2 receivers last year, Coach Prime's top 2 receivers in Boulder this year. And then they also had a real dynamic kind of a Swiss Army knife, a small running back and return man, Brian Battie, who rushed for almost 1,200 yards last year, a big-time player in the kickoff return game as well. And he left for Auburn in the offseason. So they lost some big-time players as well. But through it all, Golish, he has South Florida at 3-3 at the season's midpoint, squarely in contention to achieve bowl eligibility. And it's all about the offense for the Bulls, and primarily about their dynamic dual threat quarterback, Byron Brown. First of all, if you look at that offense, I take away, for purposes of this illustration, the 17-3 loss to Alabama. They're punching so far up in class in that game. So if you subtract that game and look at their other 5 games, they're averaging 36.6 points per game. So they're pretty good offensively. That quarterback, again, Brown, 6'3", 210 pounds. He's thrown for 1,483 yards. He's rushed for another 466, leads the Bulls in both categories. USF, they're coming off a disappointing 56-35 defeat at UAB. Florida Atlantic, on the other hand, they won their conference opener at home 20-17 over Tulsa. I made this line 4.5. I think there's some value with South Florida at -2 or 2.5. Take the Bulls at under a field goal to knock off Florida Atlantic.
Get extra value this football season with BetRivers Squares. You can win up to $10,000 in bonus money. Bet $10 in same-game parlays on any game with the Squares icon to earn a square. Brought to you by our friends over at BetRivers. All right, let's go to the big one in South Bend. What a schedule for Notre Dame. Well, it finally caught up with them against Louisville. They were very low on emotional fuel, and as Louisville beat them handily, very sloppy in that game as well. Were they exhaling in that spot, looking to this one against undefeated top 5 USC? Notre Dame now is up to 2.5, -109, a little less juice at BetRivers right now, Paul.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, in this game, first of all, Southern Cal obviously comes in undefeated, its playoff hopes intact. And on the other sideline, you have a 2-loss Notre Dame team that's almost certainly eliminated from playoff consideration. And as you said, off a disappointing 33-20 defeat at Louisville. That capped a 3-game stretch of really highly competitive, hard-fought contests. I certainly acknowledge the fact in this handicap that Notre Dame may be running low on emotional gas. Their offensive coordinator, Gerard Parker, their first-year offensive coordinator, under intense fire there in South Bend. But, that's how fan bases are. You lose and they get upset and want to send everybody packing. But they do have a little turmoil there in South Bend right now. And again, looking at the Trojans, they're undefeated, squarely in the playoff hunt, as we said. But they've certainly displayed, without question in my mind, signs of vulnerability the last few weeks. Looking at this past weekend against Arizona, they fall behind at home, does Southern Cal, 17-0 early in the second quarter. They ultimately rally to defeat the Wildcats 43-41 in triple overtime. But here's why I like Notre Dame in this matchup Saturday night in South Bend. Prior to facing USC, Arizona had played 3 Power 5 schools, those being Mississippi State, Stanford, and Washington. And in those 3 games, they failed to rush for more than 145 yards in any of those games, failed to average 4 yards per carry in any of those games. But then they go out last week against USC. They rushed for 203 yards. They average almost 5 yards a carry. And unheralded Jonah Coleman carries 22 times for 143 yards against the Trojans. So that begs the question, what is Notre Dame's Audric Estime, 230 pounds, physical, a rough customer, 692 yards, 6.6 yards per carry? What is he going to do against that rush defense Saturday night? I think, their offensive line didn't look particularly strong last week against Louisville. I think they rebound here. I think the Irish pound the rock, feed it to Estime, lean on the Trojans. They have one of the top cornerback tandems also on defense, does Notre Dame, and Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart there at cornerback. So they're not going to stop the Trojans' passing game and Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Caleb Williams, but I think they can slow them down some. Another thing, we're recording here on Tuesday, October 10th, 4 days before the game. Weather forecast can change, but currently the forecast Saturday night in South Bend, 50% chance of rain, but more importantly, winds 10 to 20 miles per hour. If those winds are present Saturday night, I think that benefits Notre Dame. Run the ball with Estime. Keep the Trojans off the field. I like Notre Dame to rebound -2.5 over Southern Cal.
I'm glad this worked out because that's the primetime game on NBC, sort of the appetizer. Boy, in as good of a year as I can ever remember for the Pac-12. And their last year, what a game we have in this one. Washington now -3, -108. There's some 2.5s out there. So light juice at BetRivers right now. It could easily go to 2.5. And I would probably suggest to wait to it does go there. I think it's going to go there. That's a 3:30 Eastern kickoff on ABC. Michael Penix Jr., my goodness, how good has he been? This will be a great atmosphere. A little sailgating in Seattle, Paul, for the big one in Seattle.
Yeah, I tell you, we talk about that USC Notre Dame game, and now we've got Washington and Oregon, a Pac-12 game on the same weekend. And as highly anticipated as that Texas-Oklahoma showdown was this past week, I think, true college football fans have to put this Oregon-Washington showdown kind of in that same category. You got two of the nation's top offenses. They both average over 40 points a game, over 500 yards a game. You've got the two outstanding quarterbacks in Michael Penix Jr. for Washington, Bo Nix for Oregon. Both started their careers at other schools, both firmly, in my opinion, in the Heisman Trophy race. This game not only has Pac-12 implications, it has national playoff implications. And then you mentioned the setting. I don't know that it gets any better than an autumn Saturday in Husky Stadium overlooking Lake Washington. So just all the elements Saturday afternoon for a great game. And looking at these two quarterbacks, first of all, Penix, he's thrown for 1,999 yards. He's completed 75% of his throws, 16-2 touchdown to interception ratio, averaging 11.2 yards per pass attempt. And then you look at Nix, the former Auburn quarterback. He's thrown for 1,459 yards. An insane 80% of his throws have been completed, a 15-1 touchdown to interception ratio, averaging 9 yards attempt. So these two guys, two of the very best in college football at the quarterback position this year. It clearly, in what would appear to be a high-scoring game, comes down to scoring touchdowns. Having to settle for field goals might get you beat in this particular game. Looking at Oregon's road performance to date, they've only played 2 road games, so this will be their third time on the road. 2 weeks ago in their last game on September 30th in Palo Alto against Stanford, got off to a little bit of a slow start, but they rebounded to defeat the Cardinal 42-6. But in week 2, we'll remember Oregon trailed Texas Tech on the road 27-18 entering the final quarter, had to rally for a field goal to take the lead late in the game, ultimately won 38-30. This Washington team clearly better than that team. It just comes down to those Washington receivers and Penix for me. I mean, you look at Adunze, Polk, and now Jalen McMillan, their third receiver who's missed the last 2 games but returns here after an injury. It's just hard to cover those guys. I think they're a little bit better offensively, a little bit better all around. I like Washington minus the points.
Man, I haven't seen a guy this year in college, excuse me, in college football that, I mean, he's hitting these receivers on a dead sprint. I mean, it is impressive. I mean, I don't care who you playing. I mean, it's impossible to guard when your timing is down that much. I mean, guys, I'm thinking he's throwing the ball away sometimes, Paul. I mean, right on the run. I'm the one, Paul. I'm the guy who has the Pac-12 network, and I was buckled down in my media room on Saturday. And I got to tell you, and visiting out with Ed Ogeron and some others at USC, UCLA, and checking out their facilities and stuff like that, they always fought sort of that soft image. It's the weather is so relaxing and on the beach and everything else. And, one thing when Ogeron went to USC as an assistant, he wanted trying to change the physicality of his team. I'm impressed with this UCLA defense. I mean, they are legit. I mean, Cam Ward was putting it on everybody, and they had him completely flustered. This was unbelievable. Keep in mind that UCLA had the freshman made a poor throw, 3rd and goal from the 5 at a 95-yard pick six, the second to last play of the first half to give Washington State a 10-9 lead. UCLA dominated this game, and it's all based on their defense. Stop after stop after stop. You're looking at this total. Oregon State, a great running game. You had that offensive line and Martinez a running back. DJU is hit or miss. He'll make some throws. He will miss some throws. You're looking at the total at 54.5 here in Corvallis, Oregon State hosting UCLA.
Yeah, and as you did, I'm going to talk a little bit about that UCLA defense. Coming into the game last week against UCLA, Washington State's quarterback, Cam Ward, you could have probably considered him a fringe Heisman Trophy contender. He was really on his game, had showed marked improvement from his first year as a starter last year to this year. But I mean, in that game, like you said, this score, 25-17, the final, very misleading. UCLA absolutely dominated Washington State. The Cougars, I don't have it in front of me, but just a little over 200 total yards, I know they had 11 first downs only, which is not very many in a college football game, only averaged 3.7 yards per play. And what's really crazy about this is you look at their personnel as you analyze these rosters in the offseason, and I don't think anybody anticipated that UCLA was going to field one of the nation's top defenses to this point in the year. But you look at the numbers through the season's midpoint, and they can certainly stake that claim. They rank in the top 10 in scoring defense, total defense. They've allowed 13.5 points per game, right at 260 yards per game in 4 games versus FBS opponents. All 4 of those 4 games against FBS opponents this year have not only gone under the total, they have soared under the total by an average of 19.4 points per game. So they've really been playing to the under. You spoke of Oregon State's transfer quarterback DJ Uyunglele coming off perhaps his best start of his career at his new school. He completed 19 of 25 passes for 275 yards and 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in the Beavers' 52-40 victory at Cal last week. But I don't see that kind of scoring in this one. As you mentioned, Oregon State's bread and butter is that running game headed by Damian Martinez. He's rushed for 586 yards through 5 games, averaging 6.5 yards per carry. The Beavers actually only pass 45% of their offensive plays. So they are, again, primarily a run team. I don't think they're going to pass it any more than 25 times against the Bruins. And part of that's because the Bruins are really good at rushing the passer. They rank in the top 15 nationally in sacks. So they get to the quarterback well as other parts of their defense. They're just good across the board defensively. I made this total 47.5. And when I make totals, I use a kind of a fairly complex formula. It actually showed 44.5 points. I made an adjustment to 47.5. So I say take under the 54.5. UCLA, Oregon State, Saturday at Research Stadium.
Get a little favorable juice right now at BetRivers as well at minus 107. So there you go with the with Oregon State, UCLA under. Paul, are you sure about something you said earlier when you talk about Notre Dame's offensive coordinator? You think the fans get upset, college football fans get upset, and they want to fire people? When I come back in my second life, I want to be a fired SEC head football coach. That's what I want to do. So I mean, we throw more money around here for guys to not work than anywhere else, any other industry in the world. Great stuff, Paul. He's back fresh from the Dallas, the Texas State Fair, and that incredible OU Texas game in Dallas. Each and every week, Paul Stone's best bets right here on the Sports Bettor's Paradise. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott on the BetRivers Network.